Okay, I think we're at essay number 4. Today I'm really excited because I will be talking about an article from a magazine that I found in Lisbon at a wonderful library called Rotaria, and beautiful space if you ever find yourself in Lisbon. Yeah, just beautiful. So the article itself is called Regulation and Literacy in a Time of Disembodied Intelligence. So in it, Gabriela advocates for increased literacy and access to education to really help us regain autonomy as technology continues to integrate so deeply in our lives. Many people, myself included, really see technology as something that can be a helpful aid, but we need to examine the limits of that help if we want to preserve what makes us human and protect the joys of being human and alive and in community with other humans around us. So here I really offer a pause because I want to ask, what makes us human? What are the joys of being alive? And those answers might differ for all of us, but that's the point also, is that they are different for all of us. So having some kind of foundational belief system, rooted in our shared humanity feels essential if we want to distinguish between what technology promises and what we actually are experiencing when using technology. For example, large language models only deal with our past information. They remix what's already there. So engaging with them can actually distort our sense of time, of past, present, and future. They offer baseline responses that if we're not grounded in our present and who we are as humans, they can throw us completely off course. Technology has been a part of our lives now for over 2 decades. And what evidence do we see around us of the outcome of having technology embedded in our lives? What does our life look like now? Are we working less or are we working more? If we look around and contrast what has been sold to us versus our actual experience of the thing, I really just want to stress that we don't fall for another new promise with ChatGPT, with AI, of work being lessened, because ultimately that hasn't been the case for us in the past. So why would it be any different moving forward just because these things move faster and have more information as a part of their programming? The model doesn't know how important family is to you, who you love, what brings you joy, or how you move through the world. It can't feel these things, so it can't give you advice rooted in the full truth of your life. If we're not aware of this disconnect, you could end up being that person who wakes up in 30 years, mildly successful, but deeply unhappy. And I do not want that for any of us, nor do I think that it's required to pay our bills or live a life. I want to use an example even of when I was young. I was a competitive swimmer and I was pretty good at it. So naturally, my parents continued to put me in races and pushed me to become better and better. But I would be so anxious, I would be almost throwing up before every race. I hated being in the water in that capacity because I hate competitive sports. It's just not my thing. I fell in love with dance. I love to dance. I got nervous before I went on stage, but it was exciting. I felt myself when I was on that stage. With swimming, I had such a disembodied, disconnected and dissociated feeling attached to the action. And just now I've gotten back into lane swimming, but very casually and for my own enjoyment. If I had committed to swimming and really pushed myself to become any sort of professional in that world, I may have done very well, because predicting based on my behavior and my stats, I would have continued to do well, I would have continued to improve, and I could have committed to that practice. But I know that I would have become a shell of myself that looked successful on the outside and was just so deeply unhappy and anxious and not me. On paper, what makes sense isn't always what makes us us. And part of this is really trying to engage in more practices that help us reflect and connect with who we are and what makes us unique and different from a robot, if you will. So Gabriela outlines several key areas of awareness for us in regards to tech and how it really chases perfection, and it gives us the illusion of control. And this illusion, located in our phones and intelligent houses, she writes, and I find this really important to note, it numbs us to the actual loss of independence by offering us a false sense of permanence. So it's not only that we feel in control, it's that we feel like we could stay that way and be in control forever. And technology stretches this idea of our lifespan itself. It's optimized, it's extended, it's efficient. That feeling itself can be addictive. And when the illusion of control is threatened, in response, it creates this anxiety, inevitably just leading to our codependence on our tools. We stop using technology because it's helpful and can add convenience to our life here and there, but we start using it because we feel like we need it. It's just like how I referenced in a past essay that it's the difference between using technology and being used by it. And the greater the distance between the unpredictable reality that we live in, that humans know to be true, and a controlled tech-driven utopia, the greater risk of losing what can only exist in that human experience. She writes, in referencing John O'Neill, that in the distance created by our future biotechnologies, we may one day erase our maternal memory and with it the world's great model of love. Of course, this notion of motherly love is simplistic, but it surely underlies a notion of connection with the surroundings as a point of origin and habitation. I want to really focus on this point of origin and this idea that we can have a connection to the present, to our bodies, to feeling. This is exactly what we're at risk of losing if we continue to move blindly in the direction that big tech really nudges us and makes it so easy to say yes to. We must also be cautious about what that convenience numbs us to. If we're gaining efficiency but losing parts of ourselves that are essential to emotional maturity, are we really okay with losing those parts? I want us to consider a really simple example like cursive writing. It was taken out of Ontario's school curriculum years ago, only for educators to later realize that the rhythm of writing in cursive engaged the brain differently than printing does or typing. It wasn't about the handwriting itself. It was about the process and the areas of the brain that it activated. And the process supported other forms of learning like memory recall and really a conceptual understanding of ideas. I also saw a note recently from a writer who said she doesn't want robots to do her laundry. And this is in response to people being like, I want robots to do my laundry. I wanted to do these tasks so that I can create art and I can do my own writing and really focus on creative outlets. But I really enjoyed what she said in response because she was like, maybe this is a hot take, but when I'm doing my laundry and washing my dishes, that's when I think, that's when I reflect, that's when I write in my head. So for us, before we hand tasks over to AI, let's ask ourselves what part of the process might actually be vital to my humanness or the craft that I'm going to get to later. Sometimes we don't know the answers until it's gone. And sure, a robot might be able to do the laundry, but we still have to carve out space elsewhere to feel, to reflect, and to create. That trade-off isn't automatic. Just because we have more time doesn't necessarily mean that we will use it meaningfully or to relax even. Gabriela makes a distinction between language and knowledge. Language models, she reminds us, are not knowledge models. They produce a lowest common denominator version of what the internet might know in relation to the thing. So in doing so, we really have to be aware of fabricative knowledge and flattening the truth into synthetic, averaged out generalities, and contrast this with what the answer might actually be. I want to call to attention and bring forward this acronym SALAMI, which really is a better description of ChatGPT and AI. It's synthetic language. It is not intelligence. It is not human intelligence. It is a math equation with a lot of words that it is using to pull from. And again, it doesn't mean that it's not useful or powerful, but let's call it what it is instead of assigning it human qualities, which again, we are not robots and robots are not humans. What is the strength of technology and what is the strength of humanity, and how can they remain separate from each other but support each other in emphasizing our greatest potential in that way? In the final sections of her essay, she turns towards the philosophical, towards memory, love, and temporality. She opens with this haunting line. At least I find it haunting. She says, "The future is always prior. Much as when we look back in the rearview mirror of our cars, what we see is a future ready to unfold. The future always lurks at our backs." This, to me, speaks to the real possibility of remembering a future, of reproducing the past if we don't pause to address it. Since most of AI's tools don't grapple with the past, they either remix it or ignore it completely, the futures that they help build aren't rooted in wisdom. They might sound new, but they're often just rearrangements of what's already been. And again, I think this is fine when we use it and see its place for reflection, for learning from the past. But when we rely on it for decision making without any of our interaction with it, without learning, without growth, and when we see it as solution generating tools, we risk cycling through the same problems stripped of human insight. Gabriela writes, "There needs to be a reconnection between humans, non-human beings, and non-animal entities. I mean, a process of recognizing a sense of belonging that implies a love directed toward the world that could help perhaps instigate a renewed connection with our surroundings, the planet we stand on and from, where we may eventually aim to attain other worlds, material or fictional, through technology. Could we, in fact, love the world we live in?" And I can't emphasize enough how much that line floored me. And I want to return to it because what an epic question. Could we, in fact, love the world we live in? Finally, she ends with a warning. Technology can also lead us towards our own extinction in order to perfect its ultimate goal of immortality, self-preservation. So I want us to think about if technology's goal is to preserve itself, and it has no feelings, no relationships, no messy history, how much of ourselves should we be handing over to it? What might it erase in order to preserve itself? It's a really big question, and I circle back to the questions I asked in an earlier essay, Confusing Algorithms for Intimacy and Binaries for Hope, where I ask, do we care about our feelings? Are they important to us? And more simply, are we even willing to admit that we have feelings? I feel like we only have to look around at the global crises unfolding across the world, even in our immediate communities, to see what happens when we answer no to both of those questions. I believe that if we want to create new futures and continue loving and having a relationship with love, we have to start by addressing these questions and reflecting on our humanity. That's all I have for today. Thank you again for being here, and I will talk to you next time.